A carrier air wing is an operational naval aviation organization composed of several aircraft squadrons and detachments of various types of fixed-wing and rotary-wing aircraft, organized, equipped and trained to conduct modern U.S. Navy carrier air operations while embarked aboard aircraft carriers. The various squadrons in an air wing have different, complementary missions, and provide most of the striking power and electronic warfare capabilities of a carrier battle group. While the CVBG term is still used by other nations, the CVBG in U.S. parlance is now known as a carrier strike group. Until 1963, carrier air wings were known as carrier air groups. Carrier air wings are what the United States Air Force would call composite wings, and should not be confused with U.S. Navy-type wings, which are primarily administrative and training commands composed of squadrons of the same type of carrier-based aircraft when not deployed. The United States Marine Corps equivalent command-level organization to a CVW is the Marine Aircraft Group. However, MAGs are shore-based and may contain any combination of aircraft squadrons and aviation support units. Carrier air wings integrate closely with their assigned aircraft carriers, forming a carrier air wing team that trains and deploys together. There are currently 10 U.S. Navy carrier air wings, 4 based at NAS Oceana, Virginia, 5 based at NAS Lemoore, California, and 1 forward deployed to NAF at Tsugi, Japan. In addition to aviation squadrons collocated at NAS Oceana and NAS Lemoore, the CONUS-based air wings will also draw additional squadrons from NAS Whidbey Island, Washington, NAS Point Mugu, NAS North Island, and MCAS Miramar in California, NAS Jacksonville, Florida, MCAS Beaufort, South Carolina, MCAS Cherry Point, North Carolina, and NS Norfolk Chambers Field, Virginia. These air wings are occasionally reassigned to different aircraft carriers based on carrier maintenance schedules. A modern air wing consists of roughly 1,500 personnel and 74 to 78 aircraft. Origins. The first carrier air groups were activated in 1937. Initially, the commander of the air group was the most senior officer of the embarked squadrons and was expected to personally lead all major strike operations, coordinating the attacks of the carrier's fighter, bomber, and torpedo planes in combat. The CAG was a department head of the ship reporting to the carrier's commanding officer. From July 1937 to mid-1942, carrier air groups were permanently assigned to and identified by the parent aircraft carrier, and group squadrons were numbered according to the carrier's hull number. For example, the Enterprise Air Group assigned to US Enterprise were all numbered 6, Fighting Squadron 6, Bombing Squadron 6, etc. From 1942, numerical designation of air groups began, the first being Carrier Air Group 9, established on the 1st of March 1942. For a while, they were given unique numbers according to their assigned carrier's hull number. This numbering scheme was also soon scrapped as carrier groups frequently moved from carrier to carrier. At this point, the carrier groups simply retained the number designation regardless of the carrier assigned. The first formal system for air group identification was established in January 1945. This consisted of geometric symbols that identified the parent carrier, not the air group, as there were just too many carriers and the symbols were hard to remember or to describe over the radio. A single or double-letter system was introduced in July 1945. The letters, however, still identified the carrier, not the air group. The following identifications are known: US Saratoga, CC US Enterprise, M US Yorktown, A US Hornet, S US Ticonderoga, V US Randolph, L.S. Lexington, H.S. Wasp, X.S. Hancock, U.S. Bennington, T.T.S. Monterey, C.S. Shangri-La. Z. Shangri-La is known to have had her hull number 38 on the flight deck forward replaced by her air group identification letter Z. Due to the ongoing combat and the end of the war, a mix of identification codes was used in late 1945. Starting in late 1946, the letters identified the carrier air group and not the carrier. The use of single letters was discontinued in 1957, on the 15th of November 1946, to correct the results of demobilization which had left squadron numbers all out of sequence. Sweeping changes were made in air unit designations. Carrier air groups of 4 types were designated according to their assigned ship as CVBG for battle carrier, CVG for attack carrier, CVLG for light carrier and CVEG for escort carrier. 2 years later, on the 1st of September 1948, all carrier air groups became CVG regardless of the carrier affiliation. On the 20th of December 1963, carrier air groups were retitled wings, and the acronym CVG became CVW. Replacement air groups, which were set up in 1958, became combat readiness air groups on the 1st of April 1963. Often known by their short titles RAG and CRAG in the respective periods. Their designation throughout was RCVG. When groups became wings, CRAG became CRAW and RCVG became RCVW. From 1960 to 1974, the U.S. Navy also operated carrier anti-submarine air groups. These typically consisted of 2 fixed-wing anti-submarine squadrons, a helicopter squadron anti-submarine, and 2 smaller squadrons as squadron detachments of 3 to 4 aircraft for airborne early warning and self-defense. Prior to 1983, CAGs were typically post-squadron command aviators in the rank of commander who would typically promote to captain while in command and would subsequently track to command of a deep draft support vessel followed by command of an aircraft carrier once they achieved greater seniority in the rank of captain. In 1983, Secretary of the Navy John Lehman elevated the CAG to be co-equal with the captain of the aircraft carrier to which the air wing embarked, with both officers reporting directly to the embarked flag officer who was commander of the carrier battle group. The CAG was then referred to as a Super CAG. Later a slightly junior captain was added as the deputy CAG, with the DCAG assisting the CAG until each eventually fleets up to the CAG position. This system is still in place, although the term Super CAG soon reverted to the traditional CAG. World War II. Typical air group composition aboard the Yorktown-class carriers at the beginning of World War II consisted of approximately 72 aircraft, 1 fighter squadron composed of 18 Grumman F-4F Wildcats, 1 bombing squadron composed of 18 Douglas SBD Dauntless dive bombers, 1 scouting squadron composed of 18 Douglas SBD Dauntless dive bombers, 1 torpedo squadron composed of 18 Douglas DBD Devastator Grumman TBM Avenger torpedo bombers. During the course of the war in the Pacific, the compositions of the air groups changed drastically. The scouting squadrons were disestablished by early 1943 and the number of fighter planes was increased continuously. Typically in 1943 an Essex-class carrier carried 36 fighters, 36 bombers and 18 torpedo planes. By the end of World War II, a typical Essex air group was over 100 aircraft, consisting of 1 squadron of 18 Grumman F-6F Hellcat fighters, 4 squadrons of 72 Vought F-4U Corsair fighter bombers, 1 squadron of 12 Grumman TBM Avenger torpedo bombers, Korea and Cold War. Carrier air groups typically had 4 fighter squadrons with 58 planes and an attack squadron of 14 planes, 2 to 3 jet fighter-bomber squadrons flying the Grumman F-9F Panther, 1 to 2 piston fighter squadrons flying Vought F-4U Corsairs, 1 attack squadron flying Douglas AD Skyriders. New to the air wings in the Cold War period after Korea and just prior to Vietnam were specialized squadrons of aircraft for heavy attack, nuclear strike, photographic reconnaissance, airborne early warning, all-weather medium attack, advanced twin-seat fighters, electronic countermeasures, and helicopters. Vietnam and Cold War. During the Vietnam War, attack carrier air wings typically consisted of approximately 70 aircraft, including 2 fighter squadrons and 3 attack squadrons, plus the special squadrons and detachments. In 1965, a typical carrier air wing consisted of 2 fighter squadrons flying Vought F-8 Crusaders and McDonnell Douglas F-4 Phantom IIs, 2 light attack squadrons flying Douglas A-4 Skyhawks, 1 attack squadron flying Douglas A-1 Skyriders, a Grumman A-6 Intruders, 1 heavy attack squadron flying Douglas A-3 Sky Warriors, a North American A-5 Vigilantes, 1 light photographic squadron detachment flying Vought RF-8 Crusaders, a 1 reconnaissance attack squadron flying North American RA-5C Vigilantes, 1 carrier airborne early warning squadron detachment of 2 to 3 Grumman E-1 Tracer airborne early warning aircraft. By the end of the Vietnam War in 1973, a typical air wing consisted of to 90 aircraft, 2 fighter squadrons flying McDonnell Douglas F-4 Phantom AIs of Vought F-8 Crusaders, 2 light attack squadrons flying LTV A-7 Corsair IIs, a Douglas A-4 Skyhawks, 1 medium, all-weather attack squadron flying Grumman A-6 Intruders, 1 electronic warfare squadron flying Douglas EK-A-3B Sky Warriors, a Grumman EA-6B Prowlers, 1 airborne early warning squadron flying 3 to 4 Grumman E-2 Hawkeye aircraft, 1 reconnaissance attack squadron flying 3 to 6 North American RA-5C Vigilantes on Forrestal-class and larger carriers, or a detachment of RF-8G Crusaders from a light photographic reconnaissance squadron, detachments of Sikorsky SH-3 Sea Kings, a Command UH-2C Sprites from a helicopter combat support squadron, an anti-submarine air group aboard the Essex-class anti-submarine carriers operated 5 squadrons, 2 anti-submarine squadrons flying Grumman S-2 trackers, 1 helicopter anti-submarine squadron flying Sikorsky SH-3A Sea Kings, 1 early warning squadron of 4 Grumman E-1 Traces, a detachment of 4 Douglas A-4 Skyhawks for self-defense from various Navy and Marine Corps squadrons. From 1969 to 1977, a number of carrier air wings were disestablished in the post-Vietnam drawdown. Carrier Air Wing 10 on 20 November 1969, Readiness Carrier Air Wing 12 on 1 June 1970, Readiness Carrier Air Wing 4 on 1 July 1970, Carrier Air Wing 16 on 30 June 1971, Carrier Air Wing 21 on 12 December 1975, and Carrier Air Wing 19 on 30 June 1977. Cold War and the 1983 invasion of Grenada. By the early 1980s, typical air wings were replacing F-4 Phantom AIs with Grumman F-14 Tomcats on Forrestal, Kitty Hawk, Enterprise and Nimitz-class carriers, and with F/A-18 Hornets on board Midway-class carriers. LTVA-7 Corsair IIs were also being replaced with F/A-18s, while Grumman Ka-60 Intruder tankers and A-6E bombers with aerial refueling pods had replaced A-3s as tankers. A-6B Prowlers had largely replaced each 3s in the VAQ mission, although detachments of each 3s from Fleet Air Reconnaissance squadrons soldiered on through the late 1980s as ELINT aircraft until replaced by the Lockheed DS-3A Shadow in the carrier-based VAQ mission. The North American RA-5C Vigilante was also phased out in January 1980, replaced by F-14 Tomcats with tactical air reconnaissance pods, 2 fighter squadrons of 12 F-4S or F-14S, or 2 strike fighter squadrons of 12 F/A-18s on Midway-class carriers. Marine fighter attack squadrons with F-4S or F/A-18s could occasionally substitute for a VF of the F/A squadron. 2 attack squadrons of 12 A-7s or 2 strike fighter squadrons of 12 F/A-18s. 1 all-weather attack squadron 10 to 12 A-6E Marine medium attack all-weather squadron with A-6s could occasionally substitute for a medium VA squadron. 1 early warning squadron of 4 to 6 E-2Cs. 1 tactical electronic warfare squadron, a Marine tactical electronic warfare squadron of 4 each 6Bs. 1 anti-submarine squadron of 10 Lockheed S-3A Vikings. 1 helicopter anti-submarine squadron of 6 SH-3HC Kings. 1 reconnaissance attack squadron flying North American RA-5C Vigilantes, a 1 detachment of RF-8 gigaseconds from a light photographic reconnaissance squadron or RF-4S from a Marine photographic reconnaissance squadron if one of the F-14 squadrons was tactical air reconnaissance pod systems capable. The VFP detachment of EMFP detachment would be deleted. 1 detachment of EA-3B ELINT aircraft from a Fleet Air Reconnaissance squadron. On 1 March 1984, Carrier Air Wing 13 was established. Between 1 October 1985 and 30 September 1989, the wing made 3 deployments aboard Coral Sea. Carrier Air Wing 10 was re-established on 1 November 1986 for 18 months, but then disestablished again in March 1988. 1991 Gulf War and post-Cold War. The Gulf War marked the largest concentrated use of carrier air wings since World War II. All F-4S had been retired and A-7s had largely been replaced with F/A-18 Hornets. 2 fighter squadrons of 10 to 12 F-14 Tomcats, including TARP's photo reconnaissance aircraft. 2 strike fighter squadrons of 12 F/A-18 Hornets. 1 medium attack squadron 10 A-6s. 1 early warning squadron of 4 to 6 E-2Cs. 1 tactical electronic warfare squadron of 4, 6 each 6Bs. 1 anti-submarine squadron of 8 S-3A Vikings. 1 helicopter anti-submarine squadron of 6 SH-3HC Kings, a 6 SH-60F and 2 HH-60HC Hawks. 1 detachment of ES-3A Shadow ELINT aircraft from a Fleet Air Reconnaissance squadron. 1 detachment of C-2A Greyhound aircraft for carrier on-board delivery. From 1991 to 1995, several type model series aircraft were phased out of the active inventory, to include the RFAG Crusader, the A-7E Corsair II, ES-3A Shadow and the A-6E and Ka-60 Intruder. While some of these retirements were due to obsolescence, a succession by newer aircraft. Others were due strictly to post-Cold War perceived peace dividend budget measures on the part of certain secretaries of defense and the U.S. Congress, with aircraft that still had useful remaining life being prematurely relegated to retirement. Other TMS aircraft saw the number of operational squadrons significantly reduced for similar budgetary reasons. During the same period, 3 more carrier air wings were disestablished. The Atlantic Fleet's Carrier Air Wing 13 on 1 January 1991, followed by Carrier Air Wing 6 on 1 April 1992, and the Pacific Fleet's Carrier Air Wing 15 on 31 March 1995. In addition, the U.S. Naval Reserve's Carrier Air Wing Reserve 30 was disestablished on 31 December 1994. 2003 Iraq War. By 2003, A-6S had been retired, with the tanking duties being assumed by S-3S. S-3S had been retired, and older F-14s were being phased out, with the F-A-18E F Super Hornets, 1 fighter squadron of 10 F-14A-B Ds, 1 strike fighter squadron of 12 F-A-18 F Super Hornets, 1 strike fighter squadron of 12 F-A-18C Hornets, a 12 F-A-18E Super Hornets, 2 strike fighter squadrons, a marine fighter attack squadrons of 12 F-A-18C Hornets, 1 early warning squadron of 4 E-2Cs, 1 tactical electronic warfare squadron of 4-5 each 6Bs, 1 Sea Control Squadron of 8 S-3Bs, 1 Helicopter Anti-Submarine Squadron of 6 SH-60F and 2 HH-60H, 1 Detachment of C-2A Greyhound aircraft for carrier on-board delivery. The deactivation of Carrier Air Wing 14 was planned for 2012. However, the U.S. Navy directed Pacific Fleet and Naval Air Forces to stop and reverse the deactivation process for Carrier Air Wing 14 in a memo dated 20 March 2012. Due to budget restrictions, CVW-14 was deactivated in 2013. Organization. A carrier air wing has a small command staff consisting of 16 to 20 officers and approximately 20 enlisted personnel. It is headed by the CAG, who is a Navy captain or a Marine Corps colonel with an aeronautical designation as a naval aviator or naval flight officer. Although eligible, Marine assignments to CAG or DCAG positions are typically limited to 1 carrier air wing. Second in command is the deputy commander, also a Navy captain, a Marine colonel, aviator or NFO, who fleets up to the CAG position after about 18 months. Also on the staff are an operations officer, a number of warfare specialists, 2 wing landing signal officers, an intelligence officer, and a maintenance officer. The air wing staff is often supplemented with squadron personnel, such as the squadron intelligence officers. The CAG reports to a rear admiral in the position of commander, carrier strike group, and is co-equal in stature with the commanding officer of the aircraft carrier as well as the embarked destroyer squadron commander and the attached guided missile cruiser commanding officer. The CAG serves as the strike group's strike warfare commander, responsible for all offensive strike operations. CAGs are typically qualified to fly at least 2 types of aircraft in the carrier air wing inventory. The air wing composition is designed to allow for broad striking power hundreds of miles from the carrier's position, while providing defense in depth of the battle group through early warning and detection of airborne, surface and subsurface targets. The modern U.S. Navy carrier air wing consists of 4 strike fighter squadrons, with 12 FA-180F Super Hornets or 10 FA-18C Hornets each. The typical mix is 1 FA-18F Super Hornet squadron, and a mix of 3 single-seat FA-180 Super Hornet and/or FA-18C Hornet squadrons. In 3 air wings, one of the FA-18C Hornet squadrons is a U.S. Marine Corps Fighter Attack Squadron, 1 Electronic Attack Squadron, made up of 5 EA-18G Growlers, 1 Carrier Airborne Early Warning Squadron, with 4 E-2C Hawkeyes, 1 Helicopter Sea Combat Squadron of 8 MH-60SC Hawks, 1 Helicopter Maritime Strike Squadron of 11 MH-60RC Hawks, a Fleet Logistics Support Squadron detachment of 2 C-2 Greyhounds. Active carrier air wings and identification. Atlantic Fleet air wings have an A as the first letter of the tailcode identification, while those of the Pacific Fleet have an N. The A or N is followed by a letter that uniquely identifies the air wing. Current law provides for 10 CVWs. Of the nominally 11 active carriers, 1 is nearly always undergoing refueling and complex overhaul and has no air wing assigned. Navy's FY17 budget request included disestablishment of CVW-14 in FY17. CVW-14 was deactivated in 2013, and though it cannot be disestablished without congressional action, it remains inactive with no commander or wing staff assigned, and it is not currently assigned to any carrier. CVW-17 transferred from Atlantic Fleet to Pacific Fleet in 2012 and was reassigned to US Carl Vinson, until US Theodore Roosevelt shifted home port to San Diego in 2015, at which time CVW-17 shifted to her. CVW-1 has not yet been reassigned to a CVN, awaiting the commissioning of US Gerald R. Ford. With the inactivation of CVW-R30 in 1994, the single remaining U.S. Navy Reserve Carrier Air Wing was Carrier Air Wing Reserve 20. On 1 April 2007, CVW-R20 was redesignated as Tactical Support Wing.